Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Premier Pundits podcast. They're coming thick and fast, my friends. And as promised, we will be looking at defensive assets ahead of game week 23. I'm losing all sense of time and everything. But here to help me along the way, to keep us on the straight and narrow, to be my knight in shining armour, it's Mr. McKenna in the house.
What a great introduction there, Ben. I'm glad I can be a knight in shining armour and all those positive things there. To start us off with game week 22 review, my team did all right. I've ended up with an overall rank so far of 637,859. I'm worried, though, that benches and things people coming off the bench. We're recording before the Tottenham game has happened, so hopefully I keep this green arrow, but I'm not too sure. But the biggest kick in the teeth is seeing Andrew Robertson blank against Brighton, whereas Wan-Bissaka's sitting first on my bench with a whopping 17 points. I mean, that is really bad. I've got 76 points overall. I'll be very annoyed if I get 76 points and I don't at least maintain position, but this is FPL this season. Crazy stuff is happening. At the moment, up at 637k, so not too bad, and hopefully leading a charge towards the end of the season with lots of green arrows. What about yourself, Ben?
Look, I'm above average. I was fairly happy. And then I'm just seeing red arrows across the board. I'm sitting on 58 points. I do have Ward-Prowse as my first sub. So there's 2 to put us up to 60. And then I've also got Ben Chilwell playing hopefully on Thursday evening. Although if he doesn't, I'm not too bothered because I've got Pedro Neto sitting as second sub on 8 points. So I may scrape a green arrow or maintain depending on the outcome of tonight's game. But I thought just with the fact that, being above average, I think that the two that really hurt is the Leno sending off. And I went Leno over Martinez, and also the injury to Zaha, particularly with this run of nice looking fixtures coming up. So he's one that I'll probably look to ship out because, as with most hamstring injuries, it's never, it rarely is just a few days. We're probably looking at a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks. However, I've got my eye on 1 or 2 others, but that is a discussion for another podcast. This is about defensive assets today.
And defence is where we think the value is at the moment, Ben. And so we're going to open this out, discuss all the things going on with these Premier League defences, because at the moment, I'll start it off. I'm starting to lose a lot of patience with the premium asset of Andrew Robertson, and a lot of people, I think, will be flooding away from the defensive assets of Liverpool. And I suppose rightly so at the moment. The team just aren't what they were. There's no kind of comfort from what we're seeing. I mean, looking at their underlying data, the Reds are doing all rightish. Going forward, the side are pretty good. And at home, in defence, the side have only got an XG conceded of 4.87, and they've conceded 5 goals, but they've only had 1 clean sheet in their last 6 games. Defensively, the underlying data has shown that they're not allowing a lot of goal attempts, not many goal attempts in the box. But it just seems week in, week out, no clean sheets, no assists, no anything for Robertson, TAA. And the thing was, previously, you'd maybe forgive them for not keeping a clean sheet because at least they'd be involved or nearly involved in a goal. But at the moment, going forward, Liverpool are kind of 1 game week playing really well, destroying an opposition, and then the next game week, they can't even score. I mean, one of my friends told me a really good joke this week. They said, Anfield is so hard to win at in 2021 that even Liverpool can't do that at the moment. I mean, this is the thing, that the Reds have really had a huge downturn, and so I'm losing patience there. And my question is, should the attention now be switched to Manchester United? City, we know, are great assets throw that out the window. Debates about who to have in, we've kind of said. But is it now time to turn attention to Wan-Bissaka and, I'm going to say the swear word, Luke Shaw?
That's a good question. I mean, United as an attacking force, generally, I think there are better assets further up the pitch. Bruno back on song midweek. Rashford looked a lot brighter. Martial, even though he came off the bench, will appeal to some people. There's Cavani still there. For me, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be doubling up on United defensive assets. I think it's maybe good to own possibly one. You know, we've seen Luke Shaw come off at half time. Midweek, you've got Alexi Telles, is back up there. On the opposite flank, Wan-Bissaka certainly looks more nailed for minutes. I probably should have went Wan-Bissaka over Harry Maguire back in the day when I brought in Maguire, although I still like him. But again, we're relying on United to bring home the bacon in an attacking sense. I don't see them keeping many clean sheets, although in recent games it has improved. I mean, the Southampton game was an anomaly. A decimated side, missing lots of key players. Factor in, the fact that they got a player sent off after 70-odd seconds, and then also Bednarek towards the end. So I wouldn't read too much into that result. I see the appeal, but one United defender is more than enough for me.
But with this really good run of fixtures coming up, over the next three, I'd argue that defensively, this could be the best run of fixtures over the next three. Everton, West Brom, Newcastle, that's pretty nice. Or is that too short-termism? But then there is that factoring in and looking at the data, looking from all that sort of stuff. First of all, David De Gea has not had a good season in terms of XG prevented. He's actually on -2 goals prevented this season. He's let in too many. But the other thing is the underlying defensive data of Manchester United. Yes, they've kept 4 clean sheets, but then they should have conceded more goals than they have done. They've actually, for once, over-exceeded. They're letting, a fair amount of big chances in, fair amount of shots in the box. I mean, looking at that underlying data, would that also put you off, Ben, and kind of make you contextualise and think maybe they've just been lucky in this run?
Look, I'm looking at those fixtures and where you're saying this is an opportunity to keep 3 clean sheets. I'm looking at those fixtures and thinking, well, actually, there's 3 good fixtures in there to score a hell of a lot of goals. And when you look at DCL getting back on the score sheet midweek, is that his springboard to kick on? West Brom fighting for their lives. Dianganga, or I've probably brutalised his name. Dianga, 2 assists in his first 2 games. Looks decent. Sam Allardyce has got nothing to lose. Newcastle, got Callum Wilson. You've got Steve Bruce playing a more attacking football on the front foot. I still just think, United, I'm still not convinced as an attacking force. Whereas, I'd be a lot more comfortable and confident with, choosing to go for the likes of maybe a Bruno or a Rashford or even maybe a Martial or a Cavani.
Yeah. So your value is basically in the front line at the moment, and I would say that this is a fair discussion point. We will have that obviously when we talk about forwards in our next video, but it's one to keep an eye on. I think that, as a Wan-Bissaka owner, I got burnt this week, but I didn't play him as well because I thought Manchester United do have these errors in them. As I said there, David De Gea has let in far too many goals this season. There is an error in the team. So I do have this feeling that, coupled with this underlying data, that maybe more than one, Luke Shaw might be a good one because he's creating a lot. But then is he even nailed? Because Alex Telles is, breathing down his neck. Wan-Bissaka had, I would say, a lucky game at Southampton when usually he's a much more conservative defender. So I would say at the moment, just keep it under wraps. we'll have a look. But then the fixtures do turn in the next 3 anyway for Man United. So if you're going to jump on, it would be now. But I think, like you said there, Ben, the better value is up front because they're one of the teams that are actually scoring at the moment. But we do have to mention them again. It's Leicester, top 4 defensive team, and I think they're a really good one to own at the moment. We said before Johnny Evans was quite a good own to have, but we've kind of almost dissipated some of these worries, haven't we, Ben, with the likes of James Justin as well. We'll talk about other top 4 kind of defences at the moment, but looking at it with Leicester, their XG conceded is top 4 over the last 6, only 4.97 XG conceded. In terms of total goals conceded, only 5 in their last 6, and goal attempts in the box has been fairly low. They're top 5 once again. So there is that reassurance there. There was also that worry that without the likes of Ndidi in the side, without Vardy, the side would struggle, but they've done well. And the fact that these 2 players are actually on the horizon as well actually kind of buffers owning their defensive assets. So are you looking to possibly move for them? I mean, apart from James Justin, they're not that highly owned, or do you still have some worries around the Foxes?
I do. I'm quite a big fan of Soyuncu. I was before the arrival of Wesley Fofana. He's always a threat. He likes to get the odd goal, the odd crucial goal. We could see Wilfred Ndidi back for the Foxes this weekend. That adds another layer, another bit of defensive cover to shield that back line. So yeah, look, they tick a few boxes, low ownership, decent price point, some nice fixtures. Brendan Rodgers will be, looking at this period now and thinking, if we want to push on for those Champions League places, then we need to stick a run together. My only concern is when we get European football back, how will that impact on squads playing 3 games a week and rotating, and the travel in and around that. I know we've been in a very congested, busy period now, but it's that accumulation of fatigue, but also then you factor in this additional travel for the players who will be, in and around European football.
And looking at the Foxes, looking at their XG and XA from set plays, they're not doing great, but would you say that, with Maddison coming back in the side, with Soyuncu coming back into the side, could this be a turnaround there? Because previously there's been criticisms of the Foxes not actually capitalising on what is a fairly easy way to make marginal gains. Looking at the top there, Manchester City, Newcastle, West Ham are teams that are really utilising set pieces, whereas Leicester aren't. But could this be an opportunity now with those players coming back? Do you think it might have been a personnel problem? Maddison is so good at delivering the ball. Soyuncu's really good in the air with those aerial duels. Could that be where you make a bit of an advantage as well? That could be a huge differential if Soyuncu could get a goal or an assist like he did last season in those tough fighting aerial duels.
Yeah, look, it's certainly one possibility. We know that Fofana's going to be missing for at least a month, could possibly be extended to 6 weeks. And look, I like him, and like I say, I think the form that James Maddison's in, he's one of those players that will have the European Championships in his sights in the summer. He knows he has to impress Gareth Southgate. There's a lot of competition in there. People are talking about him and Jack Grealish as being the main two, are sort of fighting it out. There are other players in and around there who will be competing for a spot as well. For me, I think he brings something just a little bit different. I really, really like James Maddison. I know we've had our conversations in the past with regards to the Harvey Barnes and the Maddisons for the Leicester, but for me, it's always been about James Maddison, and I think Soyuncu complements James Maddison a lot better.
And since we had that WWE SmackDown style debate about Madison versus Barnes. No, it wasn't that passionate. It was more a gentlemanly agree to disagree that we don't want Barnes and Madison. Madison has done really well. I do have to accept defeat, because in the last few game weeks he has outperformed Barnes. There was that time when Barnes scored and Madison got the assist, but then obviously this game week it was switched around where Barnes had no involvement, and I was kicking myself. I was really annoyed. But of course, again, we're talking about defensive positions here, so I think that's not a bad shout with actually the Soyuncu decision. The final question that I would say with Soyuncu, though, is that a possible rotation risk when the full kind of Leicester City defence is back? Or is Soyuncu so good and actually so important to the Foxes that he will keep his place?
That's the big question. Knowing Brendan Rodgers, or certainly what I've observed from Brendan Rodgers in the past, if you play well and you earn the shirt, you will keep the shirt. We've seen that with Justin, and the fact that maybe everybody's expecting Ricardo Pereira just to be thrown straight back in there. He hasn't. He's bided his time. Players are there on their own merits, and I would expect, if Soyuncu can perform like we know he can do, then he would keep his place. For me, only Johnny Evans is nailed in that back line. I think he just brings something a little bit different. He's been Mr. Consistent. He's the leader. He's the one that sort of stands out. And the rest, like I say, are at risk of being rotated out, given the level of performance. So, they need to be on their toes, and they need to be maintaining that.
So let's move it on to a big debate. I think I'm still reluctant to get behind them, but the data's there, and they're finally matching it for once. 4 clean sheets in their last 6 matches. We do have to talk about the Seagulls that are flying high of Brighton. Now, I can see already in your face you're a little bit kind of reluctant to commit to saying positive things about Brighton, because I am too. I'll admit it, Ben, and maybe this is where, again, emotions or gut feelings or things that are outside of the data are coming at play here. But I do get that they've got 4. I think their new goalkeeper has really made a difference, and he's looking much better than Matt Ryan, who incidentally is now the Arsenal backup goalkeeper, interestingly enough. But in terms of it, their XG conceded over the last 6 game weeks is much reduced than usual. Their big chances conceded over the last 6 game weeks, again, is much reduced, only to 8 in the last 6. They've only conceded 4 goals in their last 6 matches. And goal attempts in the box as well is fairly good with 40, top 10. Is this actually finally time where we see Brighton, who we've talked about a lot, kind of, they've got good underlying data, but they're just not good enough? Or is this just really a lucky spell, which, I'm going to put it out there. I think this is more of a lucky spell at the moment. I think a goalkeeper can make a difference, but I don't think they make this much of a difference unless they're really world class, which I don't think their goalkeeper is. And the defensive back line just isn't good. The personnel there are all right, but they're not brilliant, and they've let in so many goals in previous seasons that I just don't think that this is suddenly a good side. Do you, Ben?
I'm still not convinced with Brighton. Look, it's all well and good going out and look, 2 excellent performances and results in Tottenham and Liverpool. There's no weight of expectation there. Nobody expected them anything to get back, and maybe those sides maybe took them a little bit lightly and expected to get 3 points themselves. The true tester will be at Turf Moor this weekend. If they can go there and back that up with another 3 points and a clean sheet, then I think maybe they're starting to turn a corner. However, we've lost Solly March for what looks like could be a significant spell on the sidelines. He'll be a big miss because he certainly offers a lot down that left-hand side, a great player. I have been impressed with Joel Veltman on the other side. A lot of people are looking at the loss of Tariq Lamptey as a, as a concern. He's had a great season, but picked up a lot of niggling problems. But Veltman's come in and done well. Again, he's another one that's picked up an injury. He could return this weekend. But, I always look at that Brighton team, and regardless of the so-called fixture difficulty, whether they be green and look good, I'm never convinced. They're not a team that I would walk into the bookmakers and go, bang, there's me money, they're going to win this game, because they're just a little bit, they're too inconsistent. Yeah, they've got that good performance in them, but when they have to go out and play on the front foot, as they will have to do at Burnley, and show that initiative, I just don't think they have that. The individuals and the Trossards and the Mupais and maybe the Gross, Lallana's, individually you think, they've got some, quite attacking, creative outlets there. But the reality is, as a team, it never seems to come to fruition. And I think they struggle to break teams down. And when you're struggling to create and score a lot, the pressure's always going to be on that back line. And as the pressure mounts, that's when mistakes and creep into your game.
I think the interesting thing, though, in terms of the data analysis, that the positive that I will lay upon them, and maybe this is indicative of change, but since Sanchez has become the goalkeeper, the side has almost matched their XG conceded. So from game weeks 1 to 13, where he wasn't starting regularly, the side has an XG conceded of 14.14, which was actually top 4 in terms of XG conceded. But then if you look at the number of goals they conceded, was actually 21. But then since game week 13, when he's been in the side have actually outperformed XG conceded, 9.68 XG conceded with only 8 goals conceded. So there is a little bit of a data argument that maybe Sanchez has made a positive difference, but I think it's the turn of the times. I think a lot of teams are being conservative with their play style because of risk of injuries over the Christmas period. I think there's been that real worry. You had that discussion with me about Wolves, playing a lot more conservatively since the start of the season, just because they're trying to manage their load of injuries, and it hasn't worked for them thus far. But I think realistically, looking at the historical nature of Brighton last season, previous seasons, but probably we should only look at the time that Potter's been there, there's always been a leaky defence. There's always been that trouble there. And I would have to see a lot more, like you said there, Ben, to actually believe in them. But they're one to keep an eye on, because this is a real change. They've kept 5 clean sheets since that game week 13. But 4 of them have been in the last 6 game weeks. So is it just a lucky run? So there's a lot of kind of things to mull over there. And we shall see, basically, is the line on that one. But I'm not convinced at the moment. Now, a punty one is Rudiger. An interesting one. 4.5. Possible way into that Chelsea back line. Again, referencing that discussion that I had with Dan Dormer from the London is Blue podcast, he said the fascinating thing was, before Tuchel was in the discussions of managing Chelsea, Rudiger was basically out the door. They were trying to do deals in January to get him to leave. And then since Tuchel's come in, maybe he's somebody that he cited as a good player at Chelsea that he wanted to work with. But he's played 2 games back-to-back under Tuchel, and there's been, I suppose, a slight upward trend in the defensive performances of Chelsea. But it's a difficult one. I think he's a huge one to keep your eye on, because he's a 4.5 way into arguably a top 4 defence, because Chelsea do have that ability. They do have the underlying numbers. They've just not performed, similarly to discussions about other underperforming teams. What do you think about that shout there, Ben? Maybe not for this game week. Maybe see if he starts against Tottenham, and then from next game week onwards, with a fairly nice-ish run of fixtures for Chelsea, could that be a good way into a very strong defence?
I think the key point that you mentioned was maybe, maybe a good road into that Chelsea backline, because we simply just don't know. We've seen Reece James drop off the face of the earth. We've seen Ben Chilwell, dropped for Marcus Alonso coming in from the cold, from absolutely nowhere. On the face of those first two fixtures, wholeheartedly agree. I would look at the likes of Rudiger and think, great. But I need just a little bit more to be convinced that he's worth investing in. I still maintain that we need to be looking at strong benches to try and have at least 12, 13, a minimum of 13 players involved, with rotation, with injuries, with suspensions, and with COVID. Because, the last thing you want is to be going into games, where you've only got 10 available players. And so for me, my focus will solely be on, well, if I have to maybe splash another 0.1 or a 0.2, but I'm looking at a nail defender, for me at the moment, over the next 6 game weeks, I'd happily invest in that Burnley backline. If, the truth be known, there are some nice fixtures in there. You can maybe take out the Tottenham game away as being the red flag. But the rest, they're not going to give up much at Turf Moor. They're coming in, they're nice. Sean Dyche will start with a 4-4-2. The only potential rotation risk in that back line would be at left back. And that's, in and around the fitness of Charlie Taylor. And that would be Eric Peters or him. But inherently, if they're fit, Tarkowski, Loughton, and me will start. You will get returns, and you're getting a lot of value there for your money.
Yeah, and over the next 6 game weeks, actually, Burnley have the 3rd best run of fixtures as well. So they're a medium to long-term pick as well. Again, almost in opposite to Brighton, the data's not there for Burnley, but we know that they exceed them. Pope massively this season has exceeded XG prevented, but he can keep that up because he is that much of a quality goalkeeper. So I believe in that. And just as a final word of warning, people are looking at Crystal Palace defence. They have statistically the best run of fixtures over the next 6, but I think they're too leaky. I think they let too many past them, and there is an injury kind of problem there at the moment with Zaha out, their talisman not being there. I think they're really going to struggle. Obviously, he's not a defensive player, but he's just so important to leadership in terms of his presence on the pitch. And then the other one that some people have been looking at, but form and fixtures are not with them, is Tottenham. Really change of fortunes there. And they're actually bottom of the table for defensive... Well, sorry, they're near the bottom of the table for defensive data. There's a real shift there. So on those final 2, Ben, do you have that agreement that stick away from CPFC and Spurs?
Certainly Crystal Palace, on face value, looks really good. But again, I'm looking ways into that back line. We've seen Kouyaté come in and out of that back 4. Then, you've got Cahill, who was dropped as well, Scott Dan. I know Tompkins is sidelined at the moment. People were sweet on Van Aanholt at the beginning of the season. He's out now for Mitchell, but then Van Aanholt's back in. Now there's talk about him. He was moving on, but now that he hasn't moved on, does he come back in? At right back, you have Ward and then Klein. The only one that I would give any consideration to really would be as a goalkeeping asset in Kouyaté, but I'm not sold on that at all. And in Tottenham, again, Reguilon, if he hadn't have been injured, would have been maybe me go-to. Although the threat of Ben Davies, we know Jose likes to rotate. We've got European competition to consider coming up as well. So yeah, look, avoid for me.
I like that. But what I would say is don't avoid us here at Premier Pundits, Premier Injuries. We're putting out lots of good content. So actually, the opposite of avoid, make sure to subscribe, stay tuned in to our content, like, share, and subscribe and just share it with friends, because we do have a lot of good fun, a lot of good discussions on here, Ben. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye and good luck as always.
Yeah, and good luck, everybody. And keep your eyes and ears open for the second part of our Game Week 23 bite-sized podcast, where we look at attacking assets. But for now, it's a ciao.
And the gun fingers, Ben.